Thank you very much indeed, Anna. A few opening remarks. So we take birds and bees, obviously, to be proxies for the totality of wildlife in this country. And if we look at the status of all of that, we know we have a very serious problem on our hands. The most recent State of Nature report, compiled by 50 expert bodies in this country, looking at literally thousands of species, discovered that more than half are in long-term decline and about 15% are close to disappearing for good from our islands. This is really quite a major change in the status of the ecological tapestry of our country, leading the UK to be one of the most nature-depleted countries in the entire world. What are the causes for this? Well, they're very well documented. We know that urbanisation and habitat fragmentation has played a part. We know that different kinds of pollution are to blame. We know that increasingly we have the challenge of climate change. There's the effect of introduced species. But on top of all of these, and the biggest one of all, is the effects of intensive agriculture. This has been seen and documented for many years. So these two things, the status of wildlife and agriculture, we know are in tension. And actually, even though we've had more and more data, it's continued to worsen. Why is that? I think there are three basic frames to agriculture which have been hostile to protecting and recovering our wildlife populations. The first one is food security. The second one is the price of food. And the third one is competitiveness. All three of these things have been invoked by policymakers at different times over recent decades, and all in ways that have been hostile to protecting the natural environment. Food security used to be about submarines and blockades and wartime experiences of shortage. The cheapness issue is really about the prices in shops and the extent to which people can afford food. And of course, competitiveness has been about our farmers' ability to compete in global markets. All three of those frames are valid, but all three of them are no longer fit for purpose, at least in the way in which they were previously interpreted. Food security is increasingly less about our ability to import food and much more about the state of natural capital. Soil depletion, absence of pollinators, climate change, water scarcity, these are the new drivers of food security. When it comes to cheapness, we know that what we've been trying to do in terms of producing a lot of food to get into the shops as cheaply as possible has been building a lot of other costs in the process. Big greenhouse gas emissions, damage to soils, and contamination of water, all of which have brought costs to society through a different route. We just don't see it in the shops. And then when it comes to competitiveness, are we really going to try and compete with the likes of South Dakota? I visited there last year and saw fields 10 square kilometres in area, drenched with chemicals, growing GMO crops, bringing all sorts of environmental challenges in their wake. Is that really the future for British agriculture, or would we much rather compete with high environmental standards, high animal welfare, and premium products feeding premium markets, as well as our domestic market? So competitiveness itself, again, is another one of those frames which now is open to serious question. So I think we need to look afresh at agriculture and its relationship to the natural environment and see that actually these things are much more closely related than we thought previously, certainly how we reflected that in policy, and to see that a healthy environment actually is about the future of agriculture, and the two must go together. We have a range of policy tools to be able to do this. The Secretary of State yesterday mentioned one of them, and switching public support away from the ownership of land and towards environmental goods. I warmly welcome that, and indeed have been campaigning for such a shift for many years. I do think this is going to signal a different kind of future, and one where we can look to more joined-up policies, and indeed not only linking to agriculture, but the entire food system. We also have new opportunities around payments for ecosystem services. Some water companies are working with farmers already to be able to reduce the cost of providing clean water by removing some of the inputs that are getting into the aquifers and into rivers. That's a very good way of incentivising farmers into the future too. We have trade policies, we have regulatory standards. All of these things can be joined together, but I think the most important thing of all is for us to be able to see that farming is not the only land use we have to do well in this country. The land is also providing water, it's holding carbon, it's reducing flood risk, it's the basis of much of our tourism, and if people can be exposed to wildlife, it's very good for human health. All of those things have value, thereby helping us to understand that farming and conservation not only can coexist, but really must coexist much better into the future. And it's not only about conserving wildlife, it's about restoring much of what's gone. Thank you.